Welcome, everybody, to our first CSM Mastermind of 2023. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our Success Coaching Training Program, and we're back for our monthly live webcast today talking about leading effective meetings. This free learning event is brought to you by Success Coaching, the global leader in customer success professional development training, now with nearly 22,000 students globally on our skills development platform. Our training programs are available in a variety of formats, from self-paced online learning to virtual instructor-led boot camps. Now, after 4 years and a global pandemic, we are finally at a point where we need to raise our prices. So effective February 1st. So this is your last chance to get our 2022 pricing across the board. We are also running a special through February 10th, our 12-week executive education program offered in conjunction with the University of San Francisco. This is 12 weeks of classes and coaching cohorts led by myself. So you could spend 12 weeks with me, not just an hour here once a month. Ashley's going to drop a link to our program page and a coupon code in chat. We're also always looking for panelists to join us for the upcoming mastermind session. So if you're interested in participating and have something to say, Ashley's going to drop a link to a survey so that we can capture the topics that you're interested in. Our participants clearly have a lot of fun. Both Lindsey and Krista are return guests. So find out more, and we'll find out more about you. We're looking forward to, if you got something to say, we're looking forward to have you on the program. And find out more about our online learning and instructor-led programs and workshops at successcoaching.co. Now, this CSM Mastermind series is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic that is relevant to customer success, regardless of the company that you work for, the scope of your role, or the sizes of the customers that you deal with. We aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. The schedule for our upcoming events can also be found at successcoaching.co. Click on the events tab at the top of the page to find out more. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is recorded and we'll be posting a replay along with the transcription on our website early next week. We will be taking questions later on during the webinar, so please don't be shy and use the Q&A button that's found at the bottom of your screen to either ask or upvote a question. We are also broadcasting on LinkedIn Live and have Santana monitoring that feed. Thank you, Santana. So if you have questions and you're watching on LinkedIn, please post them and they will be relayed to us. Also, we love getting feedback during the event, but we ask that you keep all commentary to the chat window. Commentary to chat, questions under the Q&A. Now, there's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver customer success. In this series, we focus on the practical, real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those that are practicing customer success on a daily basis. And to do that, we invite 3 panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are people who are great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences and their perspectives. So without further ado, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all, talk a bit about who they are and what they do. And let's get started as usual in alphabetical order with Krista.
Hey, everyone. Thanks again for having me, Andrew. I'm super excited to be on this live discussion today, and I'm excited to chat with Lindsey and Mohammed. So I'm Krista Roberts. I'm a senior customer success manager with Client Success. For those of you that aren't familiar with Client Success, we are a customer success software that drives customer retention, growth across your entire company. And we work very closely with Andrew and the team at Success Coaching, as mentioned at the top of the call. I've been a CSM in the CS world for over 10 years, a lot of different roles, lots of experience to bring to the table. And obviously in that role, I'm in lots of meetings all day, every day. So excited to talk more about this topic and learn from the panel here.
You're on mute, Andrew. But I think that means I'm next.
No, sorry, my bad. Sorry, I was just trying to So anyways, thank you, Krista. And yes, once again, we are huge fans of the team over at Client Success. We've been friends with Dave, the CEO, Dave Blake, for many years. And they're just really great people to partner up with. And as we were mentioning at the top, we have been the platinum sponsor for the CS 100 event now for a few years, and we will continue to be as long as they invite us back. So we keep getting invites, so we've been good. Thanks again, Krista. Lindsey, yes, now you are up.
Well, thank you. And just a giant thank you for Andrew for being, willing to bring me back to another CSM Mastermind. My name is Lindsey Eatough. As many of you can tell from my multiple times saying it, I'm from New Jersey, and I live here now. I am so excited to be here on this topic for a handful of different reasons. But one, because I previously come from a company called Mural in the digital visual collaboration space, where for almost 5 years, I spoke to people about how do you work in a digital visual way to drive collaboration, but also run effective meetings. Parlay that into, and one of the kind of help found the customer success team there. Parlay that into my current role. I'm the VP of Customer Experience for Isometric Technologies, an early stage company in the logistics performance space. So we do scorecarding for shippers with their carriers to understand and lower the deductions in between the two companies, which is actually a lot of money going back and forth between the companies. So it really helps both sides of the fence. So again, I in the role I'm in now, meetings are happening a lot cross-functionally. So that is a component for customer success and customer experience as well. So I'm looking forward to talking about all things effective and ineffective meetings today with this group. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsey. And always, of course, yes, definitely one of the many reasons why I wanted you to be part of this panel was your experience at Mural. But you also always have something to share. That's always a good thing. And I can always call on you if
yes, always
if the conversation starts to taper off. Lindsey, what do you think? That's the Jersey girl in you coming out, right? Exactly.
That's what we do.
I need a Jersey opinion. Awesome. Thanks, Lindsey. And finally, last but not least, joining us from halfway around the world, at least from us, Mohammed.
Thank you, Andrew. Hello, everyone. Andrew, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with the group and to be with you live today. For me, it's a great opportunity to connect East to West by having somebody from Middle East participate and being part of your webinars. It's an honor to be here. So my name is Mohammed Alqaq. I'm based in Jordan. I'm a customer success manager with CSS, or Crucial Solution and Services, a specialized company in data process analytics and analytics software. The company based in Saudi, and I'm based in Jordan, as I mentioned. I'm also the founder of Customer Success Middle East, which is an initiative and community I've started last year, trying to close the gap between the customer success practice in Europe and in the States, and the customer success practice in the Middle East, and trying to connect the dots and making sure that we are approaching and we are following and doing the right thing and following the best practices in the region here, and bring the technology and the expert and the knowledge from all around the world to the Middle East.
Awesome,
And
Mohammed.
thank you again for having me.
And we really appreciate you being part of this and making time for us. I know it's very late for you, but I think it's great that you are trying to build that bridge. And we definitely want to support you and people all over the world that are in this space. And we know that there are challenges sometimes. Sometimes the way we do things very different. It's not even sometimes the way we do things here in the States can be very different than the way things are done in Europe, the way things are done in the Middle East, and APAC. So, when stuff doesn't seem to translate, let's have a conversation and talk through it, and do like what we do with our coaching cohorts. I've had lots of people from the Middle East and APAC and Europe join our coaching programs, and we always seem to be able to connect the dots somehow. So, and this is the first step, is kind of creating that bridge. So, great to have you, and glad you can make the time for us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Once again, and I appreciate everybody's time. I appreciate your time on Monday for doing when we did our prep, as well as the time today. And I'm sure everybody on the call also appreciates it. So, let's get to the topic at hand. Unproductive meetings cost companies more than $37 billion annually. Almost 37% of employee time is spent in meetings, and 91% of those employees admit to daydreaming during meetings. So unproductive meetings lead to work productivity loss and employee disengagement. They also lead to lower morale among employees. Long term, this can result in workplace conflict, a decline in innovation, increased employee turnover, and worse yet, longer sales cycles due to a lack of understanding about customer journeys, customers' needs and wants, details about your products or services, etc. Now, time, I've said this many times, time is a finite resource, right? And especially when it comes to anyone in a customer-facing role, it's critical that you're spending your time in the most effective and efficient ways possible to support your book of business. The last thing that you want to be doing is wasting time in unproductive meetings. So to get started, what I'd like to do is get some thoughts from my guests on what makes meetings ineffective. Who wants to start?
And Andrew, you probably saw me immediately unmute. In true Lindsey fashion. So how do meetings become ineffective? And we have Cynthia jumping into the chat of no agenda, right? There's a general lack of preparedness. And I know that Mohammed, we were kind of touching in on that when we were prepping. I use the very layman's terms of the wing it. There's a wing it culture that you'd see happen in person, but when you did that, when meetings were all in person, there was a board, there was a thing, you could interact with people, so you could make it more productive because you can do things, right? You can use kind of physical objects or whatnot. You can kind of form the agenda as you go. In the virtual environment, it is harder, but then somehow there's more meetings. Therefore, the unprepared cycle is more, because then you definitely don't have time to prepare for the next thing unless you consciously make a decision to really evaluate. So non-preparedness would be, I think, one of the biggest first things to talk about.
Okay. Mohammed, Krista?
Yes.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Mohammed, what do you got to add to that?
Yeah, I may add that, in addition to the preparation, and that I think the poor communication is one of them, the key elements to ineffective meetings, and lack of follow-ups. As preparation and planning is important, the follow-up is as important as planning, because the follow-up is the step for your next meeting planning. If you don't have a proper follow-up, then your next meeting will not be effective.
Okay. Love that.
The before, the during, and the after. Actually thinking about the intention, right? I think that's what encompasses a bit what you're saying, Mohammed, and agenda going on in the chat and everybody chatting. And Krista, you're getting some shout outs in there already.
Yeah. No, I think, playing off of, not being prepared, the, agenda and follow-up, I think, are key. But I think too, kind of pairing with that follow-up, especially in our roles in customer success and working with customers, maybe through onboarding or implementation or different projects or on recurring, meeting cadences, making sure that there's that in-between work, because, it's we could be prepared. We maybe did follow up, but then have we double checked with our customer or those that are invited to the meeting? Like, have we all done what we need to do to actually have a productive meeting? So I think like there's that piece too, is like, maybe, you know, like I'm prepared. I have an agenda. I'm like, this is what we need to talk about. But then I get on the call with the customer and they're like, oh, I haven't done anything. I don't have anything. So kind of that, you know, like, hey, we're meeting tomorrow, you know, let's talk about this. And like, oh, hey, actually, I need another week. Okay, fine. So I think there's kind of that like in between of, you know, you can be prepared, but maybe like everyone being prepared. So not just the host of the meeting, exactly. But all attendees. So I think it's a nice way to kind of encompass all that together.
Yeah, you gotta make sure that everybody shows up ready to make the meeting productive.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think I agree, Krista, but I think it's the responsibility of the host to make all the participants ready or prepared, because he needs to make sure that he is sharing the agenda, the topics, the expected outcomes, the actions, the follow-ups. So he needs to prepare the audience or the participant in order to make everybody ready. And I've seen also one of the comments here that they said wrong attendees. And I've seen this a lot, you know, people, they send meeting invite for everyone. And this is a recipe of a failure. Don't invite people that they don't need to be there. They might need to be aware of what are the outcomes of the meeting, but they are not part of the discussion. So don't invite them. Invite only the people who are really contributing to your meeting and adding value to your meeting. The rest of the people, you just share or circulate the outcomes with them after the fact, after the meeting.
And there's the clarity of communication of that. There's the clarity of communication of that too. Like, so, because sometimes you don't, there's the wrong attendees piece, but there is not always if you are a wrong attendee, say it and put the right person in. You know what I mean? Like there's so many unspoken things that if you add, I know, Andrew, I'm switching to tactics. Shame on me. But there's the wrong attendees. There's too many attendees, but there's also a lack of mechanism to figure out who are the right people to be there and how do you get them. And like proactively saying, I think to what you were just saying, Mohammed, there's the host is the owner of the intention and like has that responsibility, but also the responsibility of like making it very clear, if you're not the one, go get the person, you know, and like even explicitly giving instructions like that. That's not something that's a norm that everybody does, but could kind of mitigate for some of those issues that then happen down the line.
I think there's a responsibility of the person who's coordinating the meeting to make sure the right people are attending. But I mean, we need to back up a bit, and we can start talking about the tactics. In order for you to help people understand who should attend the meeting, we got to put in place exactly what the meeting is there for, right? It goes beyond an agenda. They're throwing an agenda into a meeting invite and sending it out to the world isn't good enough. What's the purpose? Right? What is the purpose of the meeting? Right? So it's not just the agenda, it's clearly spelling out what the purpose is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so how do you is it just as simple as here's what this meeting is for? I think it goes personally, I think it goes beyond what you put in the title for the meeting.
Yeah, I think starting with clarifying what you are trying to accomplish, and you know, if that is something you can only accomplish by a meeting, and then you start to think of the agenda. But before of preparing the agenda and think of who need to be invited, I need to think of, okay, what I need to accomplish, what is my goal, and what I have to prepare in order to achieve that goal. And then if it is only can be done by a meeting, then okay, let's do the meeting. So who needs to be in that meeting? And if I start to connect those dots, then I will come up with an agenda that is relevant and related to the list of accomplishments that I have listed or prepared. And then I know who I need to invite to that meeting.
Yeah. I think knowing, like, again, going before the agenda is what is that objective and that goal? You know, so every meeting should have an objective. Like, what are we looking to accomplish during this conversation, and what are those key points that, that are going to help us guide that conversation, which would be the agenda. If the objective is really straight and, sweet and simple and to the point, probably could be an email, or probably maybe a quick phone call with one person. But if you're having trouble coming up with, I think, more than one, because you really need to have that objective. What is that goal? And then what are those, agenda topics from there? So I think that's the thing too. Yeah. I think of, what is my objective here? Could I get a quick answer on an email? Probably. So we don't need to have the meeting. And then maybe there's that back and forth. And then we all know after 3 emails or whatever it is, let's schedule a meeting, because clearly we have some confusion here. So
just to not pile onto that one, but also maybe kind of tie into answering a couple of questions in the Q&A to that, is that if you don't have conviction about what that objective is, there is no harm in asking if it's the right thing. And I think that that's kind of what we're all getting to, is just ask the other participants. Then there's also shared ownership of, I'm really agreeing to doing this meeting. And that helps, especially from the CS perspective, right? The buy-in from the customer to want to achieve whatever you're working on within the journey. This, in terms of sticking to that agenda, we can talk about that in a moment, Fred. But I think this part of the conversation ties a little bit to where do you keep it? I know it's a little bit tactic, Andrew, but since we are so talking about the agenda piece right now, I figured it'd be worth kind of rounding it out a little bit. I'm going to give a little bit of a consulting answer, but it depends. Everything should be linked out of the meeting invite. My personal opinion, the high level agenda should be in the invite itself. If it's complex, there should be some sort of document shared, or if it's in an email, but a document's nice because you can put a link for a document into the invite and then have everybody collaborate on it, or plug to Miro, etc. You can also, what I used to do with customers for ongoing meetings, I had a mural that was just it was a wall of a room for us. And every time we met together, they would just put stickies in there for the next meeting. So that's where we kind of put our thoughts. They were not always linear because it was a recurring meeting. So the agenda was loose-ish. It was more more of a stand-up with the customer. But I think always having the high level in the invite and then linking out to where you have a high level with the objective, of course, and then linking out to the deeper document where you might also want people, like what Chris is saying, be prepared, do the pre-work. Now they can kind of put their pre-work in there as well to help consolidate and collaborate.
Yeah, so I think it's important though, back to what Mohammed, but back to what you said, first question is, do we really need to have this meeting?
Yeah.
Right. And then the second question, and I think there was a lot of, especially over the last few years, I think people over-indexed on having meetings because of COVID, and we're not meeting we're not seeing each other in the office, and we need meeting, and it created meeting fatigue. And then with not just email, but the advent of communications platforms like Slack, makes it a lot easier to get information without having to pull everybody into a meeting. But it's not just the responsibility of I think the person who is pulling together the meeting to decide whether this really needs to be a meeting. I also think that there should be some responsibility on the part of the people who have been asked to attend. Right? Do I really need to be at this meeting? Mm-hmm. Right? The only person who is in control of your calendar is you. Right? And don't make getting invited to meetings an excuse for you to be having to work a 60, 80-hour week. So what do you ask yourself when you get invited to a meeting? Whether it's got a great agenda and a clear purpose or not. Is there anything that you say to yourself before you accept it?
Do I have to go? Go ahead, Mohammed. I've been starting to ask myself that every
the first question I ask is, what's in it for me?
Mm-hmm. Oh, the WIFM. The what's in it for me. Exactly.
Yeah. And based on the answer, either I will accept or I will reject it.
To elaborate on my, do I have to go? It's more kind of like the WIFM, Mohammed, like you're saying, what's the WIFM for me? But it's also, what's the WIFM for that? Like, what, am I the right person for it? Like, I was added because of either my role or something like, but is this a moment to delegate? Is this a moment to understand something, or should it even be happening? Right. Yeah.
I agree. That's kind of what I look at as I get the invite. Hopefully there's an agenda and I kind of know what's going on. And it is like, okay, am I going to get something out of this? And if I'm not, I have been asked to attend because I have knowledge that I will be providing to those that are attending, or, it's that they will get something out of it. So maybe, at the end, it's not a checklist item for me, but am I that expert? Am I that subject matter expert? Am I, if it's an internal meeting and I'm the CSM that is responsible for that account and my leadership team has an escalation, probably makes sense to invite me so I can shed some light on what's going on with the customer. But if I'm not the CSM managing that account, like, why would I need to go to that meeting? So, I think that there's, and there's been a couple of things in the chat about internal, external. I think that's a big thing. Is I feel like we do kind of pretty good job with external with our customers of setting an agenda, making sure things are good. But I feel like a lot of it's kind of that internal. Again, like we feel like we need to have meetings about everything, and we probably really don't. So how can we apply these same tactics and ask these same questions? There are plenty of internal meetings that some weeks I'm like, it doesn't make sense for me to attend. Like I can't. I have customer priorities. Not going to attend. There's nothing that I'm going to get out of it, and they probably aren't going to get anything from me. So
there were a lot of those meetings that let's meet to prepare for tomorrow's meeting.
Who has time for that? Who has time for that?
I used to coach my teams, and I used to say the exact same things that all three of you said. Do you need to present? Or are you a subject matter expert? Are you going to add value to it? By showing up, are you going to get something from it? By being there in person rather than reading a summary if one's available? And quite frankly, do you have the time?
Right.
Right. Because if you don't, then, is it something that that can be decided, can be shared via email? I had a situation last week, and this is on a more personal side, about a loan, and we just closing documents, stuff like that. And the lender insisted on scheduling this 30-minute meeting in the middle of my workday to get all of the things, go down what needs to be completed for this loan. And they invited 4 people on their side to basically give me a list of things that they needed in order to finish closing on the loan. And I was like, you could have sent me this via email. Well, right. Why are we, and not only are you wasting my time, there are 4 people on this call, and absolutely no reason why you needed 4 people on the call. Right. Yeah. So it's just as important for all of you to assess, does it make sense for me to spend my time in this meeting? And do I really have the time to do it? Right? Because at the end of the day, when you're in a customer-facing role, okay, it's in the title, right? Your job is to be customer-facing. Your job is to be helping your customer solve problems, extract value, do things more strategically, right? And you're not going to be able to do that when you get sucked into all these different meetings.
It's there's now 3 different points. I'm loving what Sean put into the chat, because it's questioning and prioritization, right? So always question. If you question, and like what Sean put about, for those in the position where they're leading, lead by example and show that you can do it, which gives permission to the team, for the team to do it. And do it at my meetings too. You know what I mean? Like, not everybody's perfect, but once you set that from a culture standpoint too, you can fix things over time, right? Progress over perfection is something I constantly say, especially if you're in an early stage environment, The other piece is prioritization that I think that we're all kind of keying onto is a lot of meetings start to fester and happen when priorities are not crystal clear of what we need to focus on. Customer success is for retaining, growing, and delighting customers. There's a lot more that we do, right? But an experiment that I'm doing with our team we have six H1 priorities. And whenever something comes up, I tell them, you have the option to say, does this have to do with one of my H1 priorities? If it doesn't, don't go. And say I said not to, or bring it up with me, or let's kind of talk through it and evaluate it. And also every quarter, I do it every month. Look at all your recurring meetings because they creep up. You want to have a one-on-one with this person, especially if you're a virtual company. Evaluate anything that's happening on a recurring basis and see if you need it. Those were just a couple little different tidbits I was getting through the conversation, but lead by example, question everything, and also think about your priorities. And if it doesn't line up, you can say maybe later, but 90% of them shouldn't be meetings. If we're all kind of probably looking at our calendar over the last week, right, of things that we attended or did not attend that didn't need to be, it could have just been a written checklist. With
maybe you hop in for 5 minutes and say what you have to say and then leave.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And not, and reclaim 25 minutes of that half hour that's been blocked out.
Well, right. And that ties to what Fred actually asked in the chat of is there any tips around helping us stick to an agenda and having meetings go through properly? In an agenda, you can very much so time box, use your phone, use a timer, I keep doing a lot of plugs for Mural. Mural has a timer built in. You can time box whoever's hosting the meeting. You are facilitating. Facilitating can be a little bit of a scary word for people, but time box and stick to it, and early and often say, I'm going to time box, because that also then leads to what you're saying, Andrew. If I'm going to time box my meeting, it's an hour long, hour long, but it's an hour long meeting. There's certain things happening at certain times. Andrew, come for the back half. I do that all the time when I want cross-functional people to come to my bi-weekly team meeting where I'm mainly just doing some announcements. Could also not be a meeting, but it's a time to get to the team together. But I'll say, hey, we want to come talk about product roadmap. Can you come to the back half? And we're only going to really need you for 15. So do you want the last 15? Do you want to come in at the 45? And really think about someone else's time. So little tactics too about
you got to establish some ground rules. You want to establish some rules.
Always.
I mean, when somebody throws a meeting, when you're preparing either yourself to throw a meeting on the calendar or somebody throws a meeting on the calendar, you need to make sure that they've actually thought through this. Right? How is this thing going to be structured? What are we going to talk about? I automatically decline any meeting that doesn't have an agenda. Automatically.
Yeah. And the agenda, it's not only the topics. It needs to be the topic, the time allocated, and the expected outcome.
Right. What's the point?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And this is important because participant can get a better understanding. Okay, what is the objective and what I need to prepare for that meeting. And if there is a time allocated, then when you start the meeting, then they know that, okay, by this time we will be achieving this and this. And, it's no harm to assign someone to be the timekeeper. I always do this. X, you are a timekeeper. I need to focus on the discussion, but I don't want to waste everybody's time talking about only one item of the agenda and leave the rest. So I need somebody to track the time and just stop me that, when I see the time saying, okay, we're done. Is it more important to discuss this? Should we take it into another meeting, or should we reschedule the rest of the topics to another meeting and continue focusing on this? And, based on the priority and the importance of that topic and the agreement with everyone, either we continue on that topic and we focus on that only, or we reschedule the rest or whatever, or we can just stop and continue with the other. So getting the time allocated is important, and assigning a timekeeper is also important.
And that's a great point, Mohammed. You have to, if you are running the meeting, if you are leading the meeting, I mean, this webinar is about leading effective meetings, right? You need to own that. You need to own the meeting. And if you feel like you're going down a rabbit hole, that's gonna take away from what your ultimate objective is in the meeting, you need to say, hey, stop. We need to stop this. We need to take this offline. We need to go discuss this somewhere else, and then we can reconvene and talk about this more, because we clearly don't have all the facts.
Or the topic just deserves its own chunk of time, whether the time is, this is actually, we'll understand this topic better if someone just writes it down or draws a flow diagram of what you're trying to explain that we can react to. Yeah. But kind of just double click on what you're saying. Yeah. Andrew.
Krista, I mean, like when you're, how important is that, especially when you're dealing with customers, when you're doing these customer meetings? There's one thing, and there are two things that I want to explore on that is, Mohammed mentioned not just kind of owning the time and owning the meeting, but also the prep, right? I think it's one thing to you have an internal meeting and maybe you got Slack or you have emails where you're going back and forth, say, hey, what do I need to be prepped for this meeting? Or I have some questions about the prep. It's even more important with customers, be able to really clearly articulate, hey, by the way, this is what we need you to be prepped on.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that kind of answers a couple of things that we have in the Q&A. So, specifically with customers, we talk about, whether it is a recurring meeting or there's a direct like QBR, EBR, where we do have a really set like strategic agenda, and hopefully we've set the objective. Here's the strategic agenda. Here's what I need you to come prepared to discuss during this call. And we know, almost every time they try to go sideways, it's like, okay, well, we're talking about this, but then it's like, oh, we have this question about this. And what about this? And we have this issue and we have this. That's not the objective of this meeting. And again, being the owner of the meeting, being the one that set the objective and the agenda that the customer agreed to because they accepted the meeting. I think that's the key. They accepted it. Is, we definitely can continue this conversation. Let's make note of it, set it aside, continue this conversation we're having today so we can properly come back and answer those questions, because that comes up all the time. I feel like, especially in those conversations where it is like a set, like a business review or whatever you want to call it, I feel like depending on who's there, something random could come up. Like, well, we've been having this issue, or we just had this ticket or whatever. Wonderful. Great. If we have time at the end of our scheduled topics and what we're planning to talk about, then we're happy to address that. But usually those things might, again, take some research. Like, I'm not prepared to discuss an open support ticket. I'm not prepared right now to discuss that particular item because that's not what's on the agenda. So I think that is just being, again, owning that and having, that conversation. And if the customer, I've had it happen to me, and there might be some others on this where they're like, that's actually more important right now. I've had customers come to like a business review and say, we have other things we don't want to talk about this today. And I say, okay, well, this is what I have planned for today. If you don't want to have this today, then let's reschedule this. This is what I have, So I think it's just that mutual like respect and taking ownership of it is important. And, just again, having kind of that parking lot or like Post-it note, whiteboard kind of analogy, we can take that offline. And again, I might not have the right people on to answer that either. So I'd rather have another conversation on open support issues or tickets with my support team than me just trying to find out what's going on quickly on a call. So I think that's an important piece to kind of help keep people in line with those conversations that always go sideways.
I can't emphasize enough how important it is for you to own, especially business reviews. And granted, like you said, there may be situations where your key stakeholder says, hey, we need to go down and talk about this other thing, right? And you need to respect that. You need to, and you definitely need to follow up and say, okay, well, we need to reschedule this particular business review. But I've been part of business reviews that have completely gone off the rail. Right. Not because the executive stakeholder wanted that executive stakeholder who were always trying to get engaged in these meetings, right? It goes off the rails because somebody on their team goes down a rabbit hole and the customer success manager loses control of the meeting. And then they wonder the next time a business review comes along, why they're having problems getting the executive stakeholder on the call.
Exactly.
Right? You have to own that meeting. You have to control it. You have to do it, and you have to push back in a respectful way, but you have to own that, right? And you have to push back because you will have problems getting those key stakeholders on future meetings because it will be a waste. They will perceive it as a waste of their time.
This ties also to Cole's question a little bit as well. I know that, Krista, that you kind of like went through and encompassed a lot of some of the questions in the Q&A. And the reason I was smiling about it, because I have one little anecdote. I promise, Andrew, it's not going to be a long one, but the theme, apparently I'm really into themes today. The theme is kind of make space for it so you can stay in control. So Cole's question is kind of like all around like, customers love to deflect from topics they don't love to talk about because they want to talk about other things. Perfect. You come with an agenda. There's things that you want to talk about because you're ultimately trying to move them along and get them to have value from the interaction you're having. Perfect. Make space for the other things they want to talk about. And if you put that in the agenda, I know that Estella was talking like parking lot, whichever you want to call it that really resonates with that customer, but also say, I want to talk about what you're talking about. We're just not going to talk about it in this specific moment, but we saved time to talk about it, but let's get us there. That does mean that you need to think about what you want to say and be concise. In a lot of business reviews, you talk about all this, but it could have been done in this, right?
Net stuff out.
And you can actually do that. My little anecdote was, obviously I'm a verbose person, love talking about off-topic things, all about it. And our wedding planner would say, hey, Lindsey, okay, at this certain cadence, we're going to meet for 45 minutes. I get all but 15. The last 15, you get to talk about whatever is on the top of your head. And she told me that way before, when we were having almost like a verbal agreement on how the interaction was going to go. So communicating early and often and explaining how you're going to control the session, that you will make space for it and that they'll be able to go into those off topics. Perfect. There's productive off topics that you can then weave the agenda. Like sometimes they go off within 5 minutes, but it's actually great that they wanted to bring that up because then you can get to your value statement. That you have to kind of make that judgment call, but that's a little, expectation setting. Exactly, Kavita, expectation setting, but also make the space can be more powerful for you to be able to be in control of that interaction.
It's interesting, Lindsey, because usually I get the customer engaged at the time I'm preparing the agenda. When you prepare the agenda, just send them a draft. Okay, here is the topics. Those are the most important topics for me. What else you want to add?
Right.
Let them add so I can also prepare. I don't want them to take me off the track with a topic that I'm not prepared to. So let them add the topics. I can prepare. I give them the time so they feel engaged. They feel more engaged when they are part of creating or preparing the agenda. They feel more engaged, and then I can control the meeting and the topics and the discussion, and I know what is coming during that meeting. And if during the meeting they come up with something new, this is a good topic for next meeting.
I also like the sandbag time. So if I think it's a half hour's worth of time, I'm going to schedule the meeting for 45 minutes. Right? You say make space. I'm actually creating even additional space because I know that we're likely going to kind of go off topic a little bit here and there. And if we get everything done, guess what? I'm a hero because we get done in half an hour instead of 45 minutes, right?
It's like the layer one of defense. I love what you shared, Mohammed. I completely agree. And that's the whole collaborative agenda piece of, so you can know in advance and also say, we won't speak about that because I need someone else. They're not on the meeting for that. I think that the make space is maybe just like the second line of defense almost, right? Like there's how prepared can we be? and maybe I just bring it out on customers sometimes. No matter how prepared I am, they're still showing up with something that happened that day because they were in doing something and John asked them a question. Okay, we can't talk about that. Or, we still have that like little time to do it. So, but I totally agree. I appreciate
Let's get to some of these questions, some more of these questions. Kimberly asks, what tips and shortcuts do you have for creating agendas and follow-up notes or emails more efficiently? E.g., creating a draft meeting with agenda pre-populated so you can create notes during the meeting. Krista, you got some ideas. You want to jump in on this?
Yeah, so I'm big on this because I like to be really efficient with my time and follow up and not get behind on it. And so what I will do, obviously, I've made my agenda. It's in the meeting invite. I will go ahead and have that agenda copy and pasted into my CRM, which we use Client Success for managing all of our customer meetings. So I will go ahead and already have that meeting ready up and going, even if it's a week from now. I go ahead and have it teed up with who's invited, who's attending, what that agenda is, and leave space to start adding my notes. So when I'm on that meeting, I'm typically typing in notes as I can. There's always going to be some things we miss because we get engaged, we jump into the tool, share screens. But I think that's the best way because then you're really keeping notes as the meeting is going. You already have it in there ready to go. And so then I just literally copy and paste my notes from there into my follow-up email and send it. And so then we have that full circle of agenda through follow-up. That's me. I know some people do struggle with typing during meetings or keep, being able to focus and so you can record meetings, you can go back, you can do things like that. But I think for me, that's what works, but definitely I already know what the agenda is. So I should already have it set in there to help me as a CSM, keeping track of that and adding in anything. And then I'll send it to my customer and say, if I missed anything, if I left anything out, please respond and let me know. Because there is almost always one little thing I left out. And then if they're actually reading the follow-up and engaged, it's great when they follow up. So that's what I do. I just do it directly in my CRM tool because I don't want to copy and paste it and lose it. I'm just efficient that way, but that's what I would recommend. Have it already ready to go to type.
I like the recording of meetings.
Yeah.
Some cultures that's not cool, but quite frankly, I record every single meeting and I've only had 3 or 4 people opposed to it in the thousands of meetings I've had over the last 7 years. And what that does is it allows me to be fully present for the conversation. And I may jot a few things down here and there that I really want to emphasize, but there's some great tools out there. There's even some stuff built into Zoom these days, and some apps that you can get from their app library that will capture and it will do the what's the word I'm thinking of? Not the translation.
Transcription. I can't believe that.
All right.
Watch me go.
Transcription, like real time. And I find that to be incredibly helpful.
Well, yeah, kind of what you're talking about too is, sorry, Mohammed, go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead, Lindsey.
Well, it was a super quick one. Because you're talking about what Kat's talking about in the chat too is you have a framework, which makes it so you are working an expected way every time.
Right.
So if you have certain types of meetings, and you have certain types of interactions with a customer, and you know what you need to do before, during, and after, and you start to create a framework, and then Kat's talking about like a template that she has that she can just fill out, whether you're recording or whether you're trying to take notes live, depending like how you are, then you can go more on autopilot because you're filling in the same thing and you're doing more repetitive activities, right? Which makes you better and more efficient at those activities. So just I love what you shared and I love what's being shared in the chat. So go ahead, Mohammed. I was just
thank you.
Yeah,
I want to add to what Andrew just mentioned about the recording the sessions and if it's acceptable culturally. For some reason, or for some industries, for a privacy purpose, they will not accept that you record the session. So, because you have different industries and you work with different industries or with different organizations. So each company, they have their own privacy policy. And so you need to be prepared always with a note taker. Like a timekeeper can be a timekeeper and a note taker. So you focus on your discussion, sharing the screen, and make sure that you are on top of the topics, and somebody will help you with the time tracking and taking the notes. And since you are the leader of the meeting, or since you are the facilitator, you know the topics and you can always come back to the notes, and probably sometimes you can add to the notes because you have the topic in your head and you know what's going on. So
we've had a lot of people that go through the program in security, and of course they're hypersensitive to that sort of thing that you brought up, Mohammed. And so one of the things that I've heard from them is they'll pair up their CSMs, and so that they'll help each other get on a call. One person is running the call, the other person is taking notes, and then when that CSM needs to take a call, the other person does the note taking. It's a nice little buddy system. So just a reminder, by the way, we go until 15 past the hour, so we're still going to go for another 20 minutes here. If you have more questions, we're going to keep talking. Let's see, another question, Audrey, and this has been upvoted quite a bit. So let's address Audrey's question here. Customer calls, tips for engaging attendees who just sit off camera, muted, and hinder the meeting's progress. Looks like why am I not surprised that Lindsey has something to say about it?
Everyone else wants to talk. This one's near and dear to my heart because, like I mentioned, I did customer success for Mural, which is like a lot around facilitation, right? I ran a lot of workshops, hybrid, fully in person, and in virtual, right? So, and this also culturally too, and depending the company, depending where the attendees are coming in from, you have to expect that certain people are not going to want to turn their camera on, and that is up to them. And that's fine. Being a hindrance to the meeting progress is a different thing. This is where, like what Andrew was saying, and Mohammed, you as well, actually all of us, laying out the expectations prior to the session, depending what you're doing, whether it's a workshop or a specific meeting, saying, if you're willing, you can turn your camera on. If you know who's coming, and say that there is someone that can be a challenge, right? Anytime that's happened for me in the past, I try to understand that person even more. Because typically if they're like that, that's someone that's potentially a detractor or a hindrance, whether it's internal or external. And I personally always try to understand that person a little bit more to not just win them over, but to understand why. Because if they're acting like that, there's some people that are just like that, right? Then they're just not enjoying the meeting. Maybe it doesn't make sense for them to be there, and they act like that because they don't think they should be there. But you need their inputs. So maybe there's a different way, like Mohammed was saying, you're preparing the agenda. Okay, insert name here. Do you not want to be part of the actual live meeting? And can you provide your inputs in a different way asynchronously before, or meet with me one-on-one? Sometimes I'll meet with that person before, talk about inefficient meetings, but it actually has a purpose. Andrew, this is what we disagreed about on Monday, right? The things that might seem inefficient, but they actually drive efficiency, right? So there's a handful of different tactics, Audrey, to kind of dealing with that person or persons to get them engaged. Engaged does not always mean that they have to turn their camera on, though, right? And that's okay. Maybe you give them a job. So again, people like that, I'll try to meet with them before. Maybe you ask if they want to be the timekeeper. Sometimes in that situation, you have to make them feel a little bit special. What makes them feel special? Again, this is also tied to personality type. I would put in the time to do this with the person, but it always works if you try to understand them and meet them where they're at. Everybody working in this virtual environment is not at the same spot. I have a green screen. I've done all these crazy virtual facilitations. There are some people that have never worked remotely or virtually or digitally before 3 years ago. So you kind of have to meet people where they're at, and giving them a little extra time to understand them beforehand will never hurt. So I'll get off whatever soapbox I was just on. Apparently, I'm very passionate about that one. But here we are.
You're dealing with a toddler having a virtual temper tantrum, right? I'm going to make you timekeeper, okay? Oh, okay, right? It's like you're dealing with kids, and
what would you like to be today?
Right? You know.
Yeah, that works, and I like to keep everyone engaged, and I usually I ask for feedback, opinion. I throw something and I ask, would that make sense? What do you think? And I ask for people's opinion, and that will get them slowly engaged in the discussion and in the meeting, and then slowly they will become part of the discussion. Sometimes people they don't like to speak out and loud. They prefer to send an email with their opinion, but you need to be creative on how you engage them during the meeting.
And that can always be asked before some of the workshops, tagging onto what Keely's mentioning about, like, there's an exercise called hopes and fears, but also, what do you want to get out of this? We used to send out a pre-work that said, put your name, put who you are. Well, if everybody didn't know each other. And then it was, what do you want to get out of this? Like, what is your WIFM? Mm-hmm. And have them write it down. Don't give people a pre-work 24 hours before. You're just going to make people irritated, right? You're just going to make people angry before they're coming into something with you. Maybe you only have 24 hours, whichever. But if you're able to really prepare, and I'm pointing because I'm like thinking about you, Mom, of like this whole kind of purpose, right, around preparation. Give them time to do the things you're asking them to do to be prepared. And that can include what's in it for you.
Let's see. Jessica asks, when you're collaborating on a QBR with an account team, how do you make sure your voice is heard? I recently had a meeting where I prepped accordingly from the previous meetings with slides, content. In the meeting before the QBR, the sales director decided we were last minute going in a new direction, and the agenda felt more salesy versus customer success. Here's how your last year went and how we want to support you this year. How do we tackle these problems internally? Okay, Lindsey, you got something for Jessica?
And then we can open to the floor. This happens a lot, right? We're customer success professionals, right? And especially when it comes to QBRs, or even if it's close to renewal, and depending how your teams are formulated, this situation can happen in the moment because for this specific account, right? Or it's a systemic issue. Mm-hmm. I think like talking about that in two different ways is a little bit different. Because for that specific scenario, what I would do in that scenario is try to understand why their approach and explain whether it's, okay, I need to go back and collect myself and kind of write down and explain, here's the customer success lens and here's the value output. There's an activity that we had done with, like CSMs did with AEs, was doing a persona map of an AE. The CSM's doing it of the AEs, and the AEs doing it of doing a persona map of the CSMs. Inherently, the two parts of the business are motivated, as we all know, for different reasons in different ways and have different goals in terms of interactions. The better each side understands the other one and does a little walk in their shoes helps that conversation. Tactically, in that scenario, I would try to explain and say, here is the outcome that we need to get out of this situation, and here is our approach from a customer success lens. Now, again, you could say, Lindsey, that's not going to work. They wanted to do it salesy. They're coming in as a sales director. That's what's happening. But that's when I question, is it this scenario, or is this a systemic issue where you need to actually bring it up with the leadership? I expect the leadership of your team, and therefore you're part of the organization, to try to think about what is the template approach of how we look at QBRs, and go for the goals of both sales and customer success. Because that just looks more like a systemic challenge for me than like that moment in time one. I don't know. I would love to get Mohammed your thoughts and Krista your thoughts, but yeah, that's my 2 cents on that one.
Yeah, I agree that determining if it's like a one-off or more of kind of a systemic, like recurring issue, and just getting everyone on the right page, because, whenever we're having those types of meetings where we are collaborating like in more of an account team environment, and it's not just the CSM, but it is maybe sales and CSMs collaborating, because every model is different, every organization looks different. We want to always present ourselves in that we are a unifying team and that we actually know what we're doing. And so I think that that's a good, opportunity to have kind of that, internal conversation, with that leadership, and, get that alignment, and, make sure that, we are, on the same page. And because it could just be a random one-off. But I feel like I've been in those situations before where it is just kind of more of, we just haven't set those internal expectations initially. So I think that that's really important.
And Jessica, I get it. Like, I'm the queen of ending up in situations. That's why I also probably clicked that, like, I want to answer this question. And giving yourself a moment, because it's hard. You're like, I just worked on this account nonstop, and now they want to make this interaction all about dollars, when that's not how we actually get more dollars, right? So sorry, I know you're going to say Mohammed. Apparently, I'm fired up about this one.
It's all right. Is what it sounds like.
Yeah. So nothing to add on that point. I totally agree with you. But there is one comment on the chat that it's just grabbed my attention. It says, "You never know what people have going on. Either perhaps they are trying to listen in while eating lunch because it's the only moment they have to eat." I totally understand. I totally agree. But you, as a meeting leader, you need to be creative when you set the meeting time, that that it does not conflict with anybody private time or lunch time, and it you need to engage with the customer or with the participant that, okay, this is the proposed time, and they can or propose 2-3 slots for the meeting, and they can pick one. So if you are creative when you set the meeting, then people should be prepared, not eating lunch during the meeting. That's what I'm expecting, from the participant, that they have received the agenda, they are aware of the topic, they are aware of the discussion, they accept the time. So I think they need to be prepared and ready for the meeting, not for eating lunch during the meeting.
I will say, as someone that ends up eating in meetings a lot, I think it's a chicken or the egg problem, or like a cyclical problem, if you will. If there's too many meetings, if you have a stack of ineffective meetings that you can't fully get out of every single one of them, right? Because you can't break that cycle. And I'm sure you also, Mohammed, like work through with like a lot of different time zones. Sometimes if you're
11:05 right now for Mohammed evening,
right?
So
right,
sleeping.
And like sometimes it doesn't work out, but most of the time you should be able to accommodate for people's schedules or break it up. If you have so many topics that you need 2 hours, break it up, and then you'll never overlap. One little tactical thing is too, if you haven't already, change your 1 hour default setting of meetings to 30 minutes. That will save a lot of time. I don't know why the default of 1 hour meeting still exists, but there's rarely, unless you have too many topics, which then it should just be multiple 30-minuters. That's a weird word. Or split between meeting and async. But
there's a Google Calendar, and I know a lot of people have Google Calendar on the back end. There's a setting in Google Calendar for rapid meetings. 30-minute meetings are actually 25 minutes, and hour meetings 50 minutes. Right, and they get booked.
That's what I do. Yeah, I do 25 and 50. So then, if we have to, we have the buffer. So if we have to go to 30 and 60, but my default's 25. And if someone's like, that's not long enough, I'm like, well, let's just see. And then we can go.
Instead of scheduling hour meetings, I'll schedule 45-minute meetings sometimes.
Yeah.
I also
fly through those 5 minutes though in the 25-minute or something
break though. I think it's important. One of the ways to be effective in your meetings also is to give yourself breaks in between meetings. Right, the back to back might sound noble, but you're losing a lot.
You're not helping anyone.
You're not helping yourself. You're not helping anybody. I use Calendly quite a bit, and I set a 15-minute buffer on either side of them, which is why for some of you that have tried to schedule meetings with me, it can be complicated. Let's take. We got 3 more questions here in the Q&A. Let's see if we can get through them quickly. Jackson asks, thoughts on sending a pre-recorded 5-minute video highlighting a deck if having difficulty with engagement. Thoughts on personalized recorded videos in general. Anybody have any experience with this? I personally, I this is kind of the last ditch effort. Personally, I think you're giving people an excuse to not show up when you do that.
This has been a little, not an internal debate because we haven't talked about it enough to call it an internal debate. We brought it up as a topic. My devil's advocate for this one is, if it's a 5-minute video, couldn't you just put it in 3 bullets? And then if they're not engaged, like, do you see what I'm like? What, there's certain things I think can be in videos. See if, and some people love them. Some customers love them. This in itself would be very customer specific and CSM specific for stylistic reasons and how they like to consume information. I've seen it work. I've also seen it not work. And I think
videos for CSMs. I want to send me net it out in an email for me, right?
Yeah, I'd rather like a list of what you need from me and why. From a customer to CSMs, but also like vice versa with my team. Also, sometimes if I'm not getting good engagement, I do something very odd that people don't do these days, is I give them a call.
Yeah, I have experience with people that they prefer a voice message during the day, and at the end of the day, they send you an email response to everything, or just a recap, or just a follow up on what we have discussed on a voice messages, because they believe that during the day they are not able to do emails or respond to emails, and voice messages is much quicker for them, so they can get back to you immediately. But this is, as you. This is a customer specific. This is only customer who likes to do this. So you need to work with him. At least at the end of the day, we still have everything documented by email. But during the day, this is the preferred way of communication. He set at the beginning of the engagement.
And not every CSM will feel comfortable doing this too. So you can't really make people like how you're saying, Mohammed, the customer likes this. But we did videos for support videos at one point, and we were like, okay, everybody's going to do 2. We just divvied them out. A couple of weeks later, we find out this person did not want to do that. Like, they are not comfortable doing something like that. And so then it wouldn't come through authentically. Videos work if it's an authentic way for you to communicate and share an idea. I had another good idea, but it went right out of my head.
Awesome. Jackson, thanks for the question. Bagya, I hope I pronounced that right, Bagya. Our organization's asking for too many meetings just for the sake of meeting. The high value engagement KPI. Krista, you got some insight on this one?
Yes. So I think this again goes back to, what is the objective? What's, why would we set the meeting? If we're just having a meeting to say, oh, I haven't met with this customer in 30 days, and that's my metric, that my KPI that I'm held to, the meeting, it's a waste of everyone's time. But if there is a true objective, like we haven't engaged with this customer in 30 days, and because we don't know what's happening with them, like maybe we've seen their usage in the platform drop, their renewals coming up, it's time for there should be always an objective. There shouldn't just be a meeting just to have a meeting to say we had a cadence meeting, that we met just to have a meeting. So I do think that depending on, kind of, again, that structure, I'd say with client success, we are, typically a high engagement model with our customers. But if it makes sense, I have customers that use our tool, like they are power users, like they are amazing, they're advocates, like they renew, we have great conversations. They don't necessarily need to meet with me every month on a regular cadence. It's not necessary. It's just not necessary. They've asked to not have that. Now, yet, if I have something that I'm like, hey, this is going to be really, I think this would be great for you. Here's some ideas. This is why I want to meet with you. Again, I'm going to present that objective and present what is in it for them, and then let them make that decision. But I think there is that fine line of just having meetings to say, hey, my CSM team is meeting with customers every 30 days. Are they even getting anything out of that as the customer? So I think there's definitely a fine line there.
Every meeting you have with a customer, you need to be adding value, not to yourself, not
right.
checking off a box for you.
No,
value to the customer.
It's for them. Yeah.
Them.
Yeah. I'm not the one that signed. I'm not paying for, I didn't sign the contract. It's not, it's for them. Exactly. What is in it for them? If they're getting value, then I'm getting value.
Right. And I think Kareen brings up a very valid point. We've all said it. And this is another thing that we coach on is it's always a best practice to ask your customers how you would like to communicate. I have a chief customer officer who I've known now. She's actually a friend now, known her for 10 years. And I know from doing business with her, and I've done business with her now at 4 different companies. I know that if I want to get a hold of her, that I can send her all the emails and what have you and leave her voicemails. But the best way to get a hold of her is through chat, is as an SMS, as a text message.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She'll be sitting in a board meeting and she'll respond to my text message. Okay, I need X, Y, and Z. Okay, I'll get it to you. I'm in a board meeting. Right. So, you need to meet the customer where they're at. It's, once again, it's not about you. It's about them.
Yeah.
Last question. I don't know if we have, Lindsey, you actually jumped in on this. Last question from Matt. We're at 12:15, but what are some strategies that you use for preparing in order to ensure that customers are getting value from calls, not just winging it?
And this one was like where you don't know them super well.
Right.
Ask.
Yeah.
If you are leverage, I'm new to this account. If you're not newest to it, you need to know more than you know. This is my CS executive stakeholder. They really want to get to know you. Here, talk to or come up with a list of questions that will help you understand them better and send it to them.
Yeah, exactly. And
look at that concise answer.
Don't necessarily schedule a meeting to do that. Like you said.
Yeah, no, I would just,
right.
Hey, we have a new survey, and make a little survey with a bunch of questions you want answered, and be like, we have a new survey so we can serve you even better than we have in the past. Boop.
All right, we're at the end of our time for today. I think it was a great conversation. A lot of engagement, a lot of questions, a lot of great best practices and ideas and thoughts that have been shared. But it's not what I think; it's what all of you think. So please let us know by posting your feedback on LinkedIn and tagging either myself, my wonderful guests, or Success Coaching. I want to thank you, my guests, my panelists, for spending time with us today, for your ideas, thoughts, insights, and best practices that you shared. One final note, great CSMs know they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. That's why we created the CSM Mastermind, to harness the knowledge and experience of the community to help improve everyone. We hope to see you again at our next event on February 15th, when we'll talk about success plan discovery. We'll talk about asking customers the right questions. Until then, make sure to make space for yourself and your mindset every single day, and have a great rest of your day, week, and month, everybody, until we see you again.
Thank you.